Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the Zombie Train. This is episode 229. We are 4 episodes away from a route review, but I don't know when the next episode will be. It'll either be in 2 or 3 weeks. I said 2 in this episode of Under Construction, which this footage is from. But something has come up involving work, and I may be away for another Thursday. So I will get another episode out of this as soon as I can, but know that it may be a little bit of a wait. Anyways, today we have a question from Dean on episode 204 of the Zombie Train, asking about downtime. The full wording of this is, what did y'all do when you had downtime? So, a fairly straightforward question, of course, but a very good one, a very interesting one, because we did a lot of stuff in terms of, sort of making our travels comfortable and making our lives comfortable, which is, a luxury that we had. We had the luxury of having what was essentially a rolling fortress on rails, and plenty of room, which is something that most places did not have. And as well, because we were just perpetually transportation and trading, we did make, I would say a pretty penny, but it wasn't exactly exchanging currency. But we always had bargaining power. We always had something to barter with. And so that made us more able to get luxuries. At the same time, we traveled to a lot of places where there weren't any people to pick the areas clean, so we ended up getting stuff that you wouldn't have been able to get in a town that had human survivors and thus had been basically raided front to back already. This includes going to places like libraries and bookstores and taking books, because if there's anything that almost everyone did on the road, it was read. Even I did occasionally. Of course, when you're the engineer, you have to be a little vigilant as to what's in front of you, especially when you're in the middle of World War Z and you have no dispatcher or anything like that, nothing to tell you what the tracks ahead are like, other than, local statements and what you've seen before, and oftentimes those things aren't the most helpful. But we built, I think it was the 3rd or 4th car in the train, out to be more like a lounge. And so we had the war room, the radio room, and the 3rd car was the lounge. And that we sort of dolled up. It kept a lot of its interior fixings in terms of, beauty-wise. It had the wooden paneling, the glass chandeliers, no, not chandeliers, more like lamps, but, they're really nice Pullman stuff. And of course, we took the seats out, but we started replacing them with things like, more tables and chairs, more, and we opened the space up a little bit. I think we put a pool table in there. We either put a pool table or a foosball table. I don't remember which at this point, because it got changed a couple of times, but originally it was one of the two. And then we swapped it out. And then we swapped it out again, and then, whatever. Right now we've got a foosball table in there, because that proved to be a little bit more entertaining, and when the train is rocking around, having the ball sort of go all over the place in foosball is not as much of a problem as it is in pool. In pool, it's very calculated, but at any rate. So, there were tables and chairs set up there. There was a rather large television hung on one wall, a flat-screen television that we would use for, like, movie nights or just receiving, or, displaying information sometimes as well. You'd make it like a bulletin board. It wasn't a smart TV, but we ran it through a computer. And that was stuff that obviously would be shut down most of the time, because it consumed a lot of power. But when we were moving, we generally had enough power to supply those kinds of things. Now, as well, there was something that, and this is something that I always tried to pick up and then failed, and then World War Z finally hit, and it was really something else. obviously it changed a lot of things, but it gave me the opportunity, and this was a slight upside, not really, but it gave me the opportunity to learn to play chess. And that was one of the things that you'd oftentimes see people doing. There was like a set of deck chairs, like little ones, little metal deck chairs, and a table that had a chessboard on it that just hung around in the lounge. Stuff didn't get rearranged too much. But, yeah, that, and it was like lightweight and small, because you want less weight and you want things that you can get through the door into the coach. But I picked up chess, and I was never great at it, but I got to the point where I could play competently, and, that was nice. It took me a while to realize how strategies in the game actually work, but I'm not going to spend a whole episode on chess. But yeah, no, it was largely kinds of entertainment where it was, solitary entertainment or entertainment to share with one or two or a handful of people. There was the big table in the war room, which was the first coach, that we used fairly often for, like, a board game or something. Of course, you'd have to clear it off, put stuff on shelves, put stuff in folders, whatever, but it was, it was worth it to have those moments of, we don't have to be anywhere right away, let's sit down and do some bonding. Or even people, while we're on the road, part of the scouting teams that don't have much to do while we're on the road other than take inventory and figure out what we need to look for next. They were oftentimes seen entertaining themselves in that sort of manner. Of course, in the cab we didn't have very much. Like I said, I would normally keep a book in there or something. But, we used very little aside from the television, like I said, very little that needed electricity. And so it's not like, and one of the things that disappeared fairly often, is batteries. And these are, they disappeared from stores. We'd get to a convenience store, which of course are prime targets, because they have everything. And the batteries would just be vacant. They'd be missing from the shelves. The shelves would be vacant of batteries, is what I was trying to say. And so we couldn't use any sort of handheld gadgets, and when we did have batteries, they were almost always put towards radios. And, other little quality of life things. Like flashlights. So, that, we weren't able to use all these gizmos and gadgets, and we had some things that could be recharged, and I always would look for rechargeable batteries. People would not grab those so often, because, you have batteries when you don't have a good source of electricity, a constant source of electricity, whereas the rechargeables, as long as we were moving, we could charge batteries. Most of the time. So, the whole idea behind building the lounge car was just to give people a place to hang out when they didn't have anything to do. I did not get to use it that often. The idea of it was not spurred on by me, it was just sort of spurred on by boredom of the exploration crews and everyone else who didn't have anything to do. And so it was, alright, we're going to go out and find things to put in this coach that we're not using for anything. And it was like, okay, sure. And that was at the same time we were getting stuff for all these other coaches, which, up and coming, we have a set on all of the coaches. So there's an 8-episode set coming up. One on each coach. And and that's what contributed to most of what we could do. Obviously, we had people, although that's a misnomer to call downtime. I was about to go off on, you had people while we were moving doing all sorts of stuff. I consider it downtime when we were moving for most of the crew, because they weren't doing as much. You had, lookouts, you had John, of course, doing hefty amounts of shoveling whenever he could. And you had the cab crew, which, the brakeman, the navigator, myself, and the fireman. So we had 4 people crammed in that cab, which I was happy the cab was at least a little bit spacious. But, And then in the back you had the conductor at rear, and you had the radio men, and obviously people would be doing their own things. Like you had, and I don't remember her name now, the woman that ran the hydroponics, this Russian woman. She would always be working on stuff. My Uncle Paul would always be working on stuff in the foundry, and then my Aunt Marie would usually be making stuff in the diner just to prepare for whatever the next meal was. So, most of the time when we were running, people had things to do, and these were the people that typically had things to do no matter what. These were the people that didn't get to enjoy the leisure time so much. And I was one of the people that didn't get to enjoy the leisure time so much, partly because if we're not moving, we're not doing anything. And so it was a high priority to always keep moving. There was always something that we had to deliver, someplace we had to be, and if we didn't, we basically wanted to check on places that we hadn't checked on either in a long time or yet. So, no matter what, we had a reason to keep moving. I didn't get a lot of downtime. I did go on some of these exploration missions, though, where I could have stayed back. I don't know. It was sort of a getting off the train thing. As much as I liked being there, things get old, of course. Now, that's the other reason why I wanted to just go places, places we hadn't been before if we didn't have a particular reason to go someplace. Even if it could have cost some fuel, usually it was beneficial. And typically it had the added benefit of staving off boredom. Or to sit in the cabin and read, like I said. I went through so many books. The exploration team, the first time this came to mind, was like, well, what should we put on these walls? I don't know, shelves. Okay. We don't have anything to put on the shelves. Exploration team is out and I'm getting radio reports back. Oh, we found this place, we found this place. And I go, and they go, or I asked them where they were because we were looking at a map. Because I was trying to guide them to some place in particular. And we're like, oh, we're by the library. And I look and I see the library and I go, oh, can you go in the library? Like, check if it's unlocked, see what kind of situation it's in, and then we started accumulating books. And yeah, and we must have brought on hundreds of books just in total. Obviously we traded some out. We brought on and this was a stroke of, I won't say a stroke of genius, but it was like wow, that's a good idea. We started taking encyclopedias. Whenever we found an encyclopedia, we could take it, because they were huge bargaining tools. And it's funny, you get these throwbacks to ages before the internet, when the internet basically ceases to exist. And people are in need of encyclopedias, people are in need of even dictionaries and things like that, things to help you look stuff up that you wouldn't be able to get otherwise. Almanacs, road maps, whatever. Oh, atlases is what I was thinking of, not road maps, but yes, road maps as well. And these were the kind of things where we could take them, and some time would be dedicated to creating, handmade copies of maps and copies of important books, and then we could just trade with those. And that is something that I always forget, because it seems like such an insignificant thing, because it's just books. But it's information, and it got us so much. Just the ability to have and give out copies of that information. Now, at the same time, we needed maps as well, but, during leisure time, that's what most people would be doing, or during downtime. Most people would be working on something, they'd find something to do, because there was always something to do, especially in the planning aspect. We had trip plans detailed out years ahead in theory. It was like, oh, we can go here, we can go here, we can go here. People mapping stuff out, people gathering reports of what's broken where, and then us devising solutions on how to fix that, bridges or what have you. So, downtime was these... Think of the things you do when the power's out at home. Those are the things during downtime. Although, as well, we did have, beach days or whatever, where, we're in Maine, we pull up next to Old Orchard Beach and go, screw it, we can leave the train here for a little bit, and everybody goes down into the water, and, that was always nice, especially before we had, decent showers. That'd be a good way to get cleaned off as well. But anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I will see you in a couple of weeks.